Welcome and hello to the IrisBG webinar on May 2018, on the Thursday, the 3rd of May. It's Havard from IrisBG and Greg Payton from the Dawes Arboretum in Ohio. Hello, Greg.
Hello, hello. I just wanted to warn people too. I called in on the phone today because I received an email saying that the internet may go down unexpectedly because of some work being done. So I might not have a screen in a bit, but we'll see.
Yep.
But I mean, I should still have the phone. So.
Yep, that's a smart move. If you also, in general, if your internet is a bit unstable or other reasons you have problems with audio in general, then calling in and using the phone as your audio is sort of easier. And there's a local, or not a local, but a national number you can dial from most places on the earth. So.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Today another monthly webinar where we have a number of questions that we have received. So we will not have a specific topic as such. We will talk about or try to answer a few questions that we received through the emails, etc. First one we're going to deal with is regarding mapping and how to set up. How do I get my own maps into Iris? That sort of is a repeating question. People ask that, and yeah. I'll go through the process so that you have, hopefully, after you've gone through this explanation, people understand how it works. So I'm just playing with the trial version here now, and obviously when you use Iris, if you want to pull up a map, let's just do that. I'm just going to bring up a map of all the living plants. You do that this way. You go into reports, maps, items map, for example. This is the trial database, so there's not that many. So I can just click view and then get the whole map in one operation without any sort of. Sometimes people have, if you have a large collection, 20 to 30,000, then it takes a bit longer. But so here we got the
map.
I
tell you, even with mine, I mean, we have, many thousands of plants, and if I do that same report, it just pops up with a map of our grounds just covered in dots. It's almost impossible to see the ground around the dots. So.
Yeah, exactly. Probably more. That is more the problem than that it takes a long time. It takes a few. 3-4 seconds depending, but then
but once you start zooming in, you start to see the roads and the buildings, and you can tell where you're at.
Yep. So and then of course when you get Iris, you will always have Google and all the other online maps available. They have some limitations, so it's not unusual that you then might want to get your own map instead. So you have full control. Google may have taken a picture of your garden 2 years ago before you made the new border, or there was a wedding on the lawn or something, and you don't want to see that all the time. So, and then that's when you want to have an option of your own garden here coming up. So I think there is a trial version map here. I'm just going to Oslo, this one. It's the same garden, but then made using a custom mapping tool, and then superimposed on actually Bing Maps, I think here it looks like. So how do I get this? How do I get this map? How do I make it? Well, that first question I'm not going to answer to you. There are several tools out there. Iris is not a tool to actually draw maps. So what Iris is doing here is pulling this map from somewhere and then putting the markers on top of it. So this underlying map is something you need to create using a map tool such as ArcGIS from Esri, Quantum GIS, and that's the first thing. Iris use geographic maps. So if you are used to using a drawing tool like AutoCAD or similar tools, you will then at some point need to convert it into a geographic map. And that sometimes that's a bit tricky, depends on how that drawing is made. So be a bit aware of that. So if you're planning to, it's a long-term plan to keep on refining that map, I think it might be smarter to look into getting hold of or start working with geographic maps straight away instead of trying to convert it, because there are often a risk of, or there is a risk of either losing data or it's not the smoothest kind of transfer, depending again on how the map is made. When it's made, it needs to follow with certain requirements, and I'm going to show you where that requirements are made. So the first thing then needs to happen is that you need to put the map on what is called a WMS server, web map service. So that means that Iris can then connect to that service. And I'll show you where that is set up, so that might help you to understand a bit better. If I go to down here under definitions, oops, and then map providers, I have a number of maps I've tested here, so it's a bit confusing maybe, but this map that we looked at now, that is on a map server here, and then you configure which layers you want and where it is on the planet and a few other things. You don't need to really understand this at this point, so we normally would help people if they get stuck on this particular question. Now the question is, where is this map server? So it's a bit similar to having your own database server, but requires a different type of skill set. So you might actually, if you work for a university or a large institution, you might actually have one of these things available. We've seen also that some counties have good maps or good satellite imagery or even drone imagery. So that's worth looking around to see if there is that kind of service that covers your garden. But if you want to have your own maps hosted and you don't have this service, we also have one of those servers running, so we can host your maps for you. And then I'm going to go and show you what you need to do to get that map. Hold on. So if you go to our website, hold on, I'm just going to sort something out to make it a bit more readable here. So if you go to our website here, and then you go to sort of mapping, and then you go down here to preparing maps for hosting. So this tells you even more about if we go to host the map, but in general, a few things are general recommendations anyway. One is what kind of projection you need, and a few tips on how the map should be prepared to make it look as good as possible. Some of these tips, a lot of these tips are related to ArcGIS. So, but some of them are generic. So if you use Quantum GIS or other GIS tools, some of these things are still the same. And then when you're ready, you send it to us. Or as Greg might want to mention, you could set up your own server. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it's absolutely possible. Maybe you could slip in a few words about that, Greg.
Yeah, sure. I'm just trying to think of the name of it right now, and I'll find it. But we have a
Geoserver.
Yeah, thank you. A freeware server you can download and run on your own server called Geoserver. And it's very bare bones. You basically start it by running a batch file from your server, and it brings up the black box and loads everything. And then there's a website you go to where you can create all of your, and you just take the shape files that you made in ArcGIS or whatever tool you had, QGIS, Quantum GIS, will make the same shape files, and then just create packages of these shape files. And although we have our main maps and everything that are used on the internet and in-house hosted by IrisBG, I use QGIS for quick fixes because I try not to burden Havard by sending him a new map every time I add one trail or change one planting bed. That's a little excessive. So maybe twice a year I'll send him updated files that he can spend time uploading. But if I want to map plants and I just had a fresh garden put in and a new trail and new beds, I can I can pull up this alternate map and see my changes live immediately to know that they match with how things look. So if you had an inclination, you could hire your own server. Like you would if you had a website. You go to one of these hosting services and where you have access, and make sure you're allowed to install this software on their server, but then you can access it and load your files up that way. That way, you don't have to worry about the security and people trying to hack the servers and that sort of thing, as if you would if you used your own in-house server. Unless you're a big college and have an IT department and they already do that, then that's totally different. But
yep.
I can't show you online the one that's internal through our free server, because it's not, it doesn't leave the firewall of the place here. So
yeah. So to summarize, it's sort of the reason it needs to be on the server is quite obvious when you think about it, in terms of the fact that all your staff needs to access the map, so it needs to be somewhere central. And if you have something like Garden Explorer, and also with the new Iris handheld, that map needs to be integrated and accessible through outside your internal network as much as inside. So anyway, it is possible to set it up yourself, but if you don't want to go that route, then we are there to help you with our service. Or yeah, that's it. Some people have asked a number of times before, can we integrate Iris with the ArcGIS Online? And the answer is no, and not as far as I know, because they don't offer WMS. That's the key thing here, that you can connect to a WMS service. So yeah, great. Any questions beyond that? No. Okay. So this is finally, this is our Garden Explorer at Dawes Arboretum, and you can see here we're pulling a nice map from this is coming straight from that servers. Yeah, as in an alternative to then, for example, Google or Bing. Yeah, great.
And just as an update for you, Havard, I do have 2 new trails being installed, nice paved trails going in. So as soon as they're up and mapped, I'll be sending you some new files to host.
Oh, typical, isn't it? Yeah.
Always making things better. It's terrible, I know.
Yeah, exactly. You don't rest, do you? Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I look forward to seeing the new trails. That's great. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go to one of the other questions. There was one question from last week which talked about concurrency and number of people using Iris at the same time, and some systems have this idea about record locking. So when you start working on a record, then other users cannot look at it or enter into it. But in Iris, the approach is a bit more, what shall I say, democratic.
More liberal.
Or liberal. Yeah, I was a bit careful there with going political wording here. But so the point here is that if I open up just any accessions there, I'll just search and open here, and my colleague does the same. We are basically both looking at it. If I then start making changes to certain parts here, say, okay, write a comment or something, and the other person does the same, and we both click save at the same time, the last person will actually just be the one who wins in that instance. However, sort of we found over time that, especially with plant records, it's not very likely that most people work on the exact same record at the same time. And if they do, it's also so it's a split up. It's a bit more complicated than that, because if I make a change on the item here and the other person is making a change on the main thing here, we won't have any conflicts anyway. But basically, the last person wins. That's the general principle. And we haven't seen that as a sort of, after all these years, that caused any problem. Much less problem than a locking mechanism would have introduced. So yeah. that's the way that works. Yeah.
So I guess a good rule of thumb is if you're really worried about it, you could close it, go back and search for it again, and see if your change is still there. But as he said, the chances of that happening are, you're more likely to be struck by lightning probably.
Well, yeah, depends on what part of the country you live in, I suppose. But
yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's go to
question just came through here. Let me see. So a person could have a record open, and when they go back to see a change that was made while it was open. I suppose so. Yeah, you could be looking at a record, not make any changes, clear it, go back, find it again, and find edits made to it since you were just looking at it.
Yep. That's ideally one much question if I should have a refresh so you can sort of get the latest one of the one you're looking at. Easier often is if you search for something. If I go next and then back again, you get the latest one. It's when you have a list here and the name is now changing, that one changed the list. But when I actually open the record, we'll pull the full record from the database, so we get the fresh goods straight from the supplier.
Right, because if you're into databases, it's a client server setup, so it's not storing stagnant data. Each time you pull up a record, it's drawing that data directly from the server. So when you click next, it's pulling that data live. Yep. And you have a stagnant copy of it on your screen while you're editing it, but as soon as you save it, it sends it back, and then you pull the next data for the next record.
Yep. Okay. I mean, in our real world, these shouldn't be things you should worry too much about. But thanks for the questions. Anyway, it's there are seldom any kind of issue with that kind of stuff. So anyway, let's go to the next one. The benches. There was a bit of confusion. I'm not sure how to clearly link the info with funding, and I'll repeat. So when you record a funding, let's bring up funding again. So for those who are not familiar, funding is used to record information about somebody who has either donated money or other donations, and then what kind of trees or benches or other assets that were purchased for that money. If I bring up one example here, so you basically record a text and then a bit of description, and then you can link up to the person who actually did it through the contacted lists, and then you have in this case we got a tree and a bench. So I'm not sure what the question was all about, but this is how we link it together. There is one slight limitation. When I look at this particular tree, for example, so if I open up this accession, I'll open it the normal way. So I'm just going to go here, and when somebody looks at this accession and think, oh yeah, and then they see references, and then they will see here that it's actually a memorial tree because it's been funded, or maybe other reasons, not necessarily a memorial tree, but anyway, that is slightly less obvious when it comes to the bench. So the benches and other assets are found under management and assets. So when you look at the bench here, you won't see directly here that it has a link to funding. So that's why you should maybe record a few more details on the bench here in the asset screen. We might come with an update later on where there's more possibilities to see the details like you do with the accession. But at the moment, there's no sort of visual confirmation that this is part of a funding. So you might want to write something. I don't know if you do something here, Greg, with
No, I just trust myself to, if I have the asset, that it's linked to something as I enter it. Yeah. Another way to explain it is back to your funding screen.
Sorry, I got a bit.
Yeah, there you go. Your items are obviously from the accessions, and your assets are basically accessions of assets. So they all come from somewhere. The items just come from the accession screen. The assets come from the asset screen. They're like their own entries, just from a different source. If that's a easy way to think of it.
Yep.
So to add an asset or to add an item and accession to the funding screen, it has to be accessioned. So to add an asset, you have to put in the asset first. So it has to exist before you can add it to the funding.
Yeah, or you could actually add it on the fly here, but
yeah.
Yeah, but yes,
right.
You're right. Yeah.
But just as a simple way to think of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Then that was that thing, that question. Yeah. There was some systems have some logic. This is another question that's come up with when you record plants. We go to this plant here, and you have this field here, number of specimens. So normally it might be 1, or sometimes when do you record 1, 2, whatever. It's entirely up to you, but I think a lot of gardens, when they reach a certain number, they switch to writing mass or group of plants. Some plants are very hard to count because they're intertwined and stuff like that. But what is what's the middle the approach at the Dawes, Greg, by the way?
It's a combination. In general, probably 95% of our plants are there's one row for one individual. So I go ahead and put a 1 in all those fields just to show that it's one plant. But then say we had 3 or 5 plants planted in a bed close together, and say there's something suckering like willows or viburnum or something like that, or hollies, shrub hollies, and after a while they've grown together and you can't tell where one starts and the other ends because all the sprouts have entered between them, then I will mass them, join them together, and make one row a quantity of 3, and then I take the other 2 items and I have a status field called masked that turns it red, so it's not existing anymore, but then it's basically linked into that first item number.
Oh, I see. So you do the you do it that way. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right. So I can see where the plant was because it still has its coordinates from when it was mapped, and then I put the date that it was masked in that field. So I still have history of where the plant was and what record it went into, and then I join them with the item reference there to show that it is now referenced by this first item number.
Yeah,
but then in the nursery for things like things for plant sale and things that there's just groups of, I will actually have quantities 3, 5, 10, something.
Yeah, especially in the nursery, and then you can split it up later on when you move it out in the garden.
Sure.
And the only thing I wondered about when you mass, I mean, with you having arboretum, so a lot of these plants will live quite a long time. Do you still mass them? Because you might at some point, want to track other details on that plant, whatever that might be, if you take a cutting from it, or if you, but you then lose that granularity if you start massing them. But that might not be a big deal. But yeah.
Right. But with those 2 and 3 records that show massed, I still can have information about measurements and label types and all the history that went with them up until the point that it was masked.
Yeah. But you are up, exactly. That's the keyword, up until it was masked. Yeah. So I was a bit unusual in my head, at least, to reverse it. Usually you do the other way around. You start with a group of plants, and then when they go older, you split them up. But yeah,
it works for us. So
yeah. Okay. Cool. So one question is there anything automatic? So when you write mass, will it become a number 5 or something? No, there is no such number. It's automatic. There's no magic stuff at all here. You just type what you like. And the number is not used for any arithmetic or anything like that. You can put it into Excel and sort of try to calculate it that way, but Iris doesn't do anything with that field in terms of using it as a number. So
right, yeah. and even when you do a report in Excel, the quantity field is basically text, so you have to convert all those fields to a numeric field just so you can do math on them.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it could say packet, or it could say mass, or it could say group, so it's not necessarily a number field to start with.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay, so any questions coming in while we look at these things? No? Okay, I'm just see. Yeah, there was some that's come up before. So when you work on your plan, especially in taxonomy, you might go in here and write a nice description on some taxa. Let's have like a taxon. Hold on, I'm just going to bring up something here, and then this will then go online. And then the question is, can I write stuff like this tree is very, and then start doing cool stuff like HTML tagging? And the answer is no. This will be listed as this when it goes online, unfortunately. We are looking into that. Maybe, yeah, Greg?
I was just going to say, there are certain things like in your trails and things like that in the text boxes there. I've done that. I've added centering, and I've added links and things to it, so that one does get translated. But I've never tried it in the description field under. I would be. I have the feeling it might not work in the future. Be a bit wary. Or I mean, we should either, because the challenge is that you might actually add, if the HTML is not correct, there's no. We need to then introduce validators to make sure that it's valid HTML, so that you don't. So people don't accidentally start recording this kind of information, and then the whole page goes bananas. That's what's tricky. So I'm just saying, for general advice, don't do it. And then we might look into supporting it, but then having a filter on only basic codes like centering and basic typographical tags. Yeah, because I've used bold and I've used italics and different things like that. I mean, emphasis. So.
So that was a question I had from Elaine. So what we'll do is we have a tool to take away the HTML code that you might have, so that you don't get any trouble really when we transfer the data. Okay.
Yeah, because I just know, like on if you had time and you went back to my website and looked at like some of the tree dedicators, I do kind of center the text and bold the plant name and things like that, but it just makes it look better.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. I think it's sort of nice that it's a nice way to do it, but we didn't think about it when we designed it. So we should make it robust if it's going to be sort of fully supported. I think that's probably what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So it's more of a hack by users, is what you're saying.
Yep. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Any other things? No. I don't think so. Localities. No, that was something. No. In general, for those of you listening, that there are quite a lot of things happening in May. Next week, we will be in Lisbon, in Portugal. So if you're there, that would be great. It's the European.
If you're out that way, stop in.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you have no plans, we'll be there. So please feel free to visit.
Yeah, I just always, fly out to Portugal for the weekend. That's a common thing for me.
Yeah, I know, Mr. Globetrotter Greg. Yeah, so it's
actually, at the end of next week, I'll be in Green Bay, Wisconsin, doing a site review for the plant collection of the network. So that's as far as I get.
Well, but then and then there's the user conference at Cambridge on May the 18th. So if you can come there, that would be fantastic. It's already fully booked, unfortunately, or that's good news that we're popular, but yeah. And then at the APGA conference on the 4th to 8th of June, we have a workshop there as well. So I don't know. I think that's fully signed up as well, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So please check with the conference organizers if you haven't signed up for that. That's a busy 30 days plus for us. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. We are now quite early. I see 15:36, and I have no more questions. There were a few questions about labeling, wasn't there? Sorry, I really forgot.
I mean, Elaine says, "Is there a top 10 mistake or a top 10 list of mistakes that are commonly made by users?" That's a good one. Top 10 list, huh?
Well, I think if I could say top one mistake in terms of misunderstanding how the software behaves, I think this one, which I'm going to show you now, that is that's what I would call overthinking how Iris works. And that is when you go into an accession and want to make changes to a plant like this one. It was planted on the 1st of February. And then you want to say, okay, we've moved it to somewhere else. And then you might feel inclined that you need to add that because like this is new information. So that's one mistake that people have done in the past, which has quite unfortunate consequences. So what is not necessarily logical is that you're going to go say, okay, I've moved it. So you have to just change the current record to whatever status that is. So that's 1st of May 18, and then you move it to another location. And of course, you feel like now you're actually what's happening to the other data that I had here. I'm going to change the coordinates as well. So we're going to put the marker over here, for example. And then when I save it, that's when you see that the history is automatically made for you. So that's actually, I think, the most, in terms of commonality and significance, this is the most important misunderstanding that people might make. So, yeah. Other mistakes? I don't know. I think item management, we have had cases where people don't read what, some people see a dialog box and they click OK and said, oh, what was that?
Take your time.
Yeah,
when doing mass updates, take your time.
Yeah, exactly. So we had one recently where they, updated. They were going to update 4, and they updated over 1,000. But then, so it was a bit of a, But anyway.
And Don just, Don just asked about the symbology there into the item types, and that's something we talked about in the past, and actually right in the, I think it's in the blog, isn't it, on your webpage?
It's on the forum,
Yeah, or the forum. Yeah, we have files you can download with all those little symbols to add to your own own system.
Go to get. Going back to explain what the question was before I carry on. Get too excited here. It was these lovely leafy symbols here, and seed and what have you. How can I put them in? We did talk about it last webinar, but we then also consequently added the files. So if you go to support and user forum, and it might actually be alternative symbols. It's already still on the recent topic. So, but symbology, go to this link here, and then you will see how you can add them, and also a link to a zip file that includes the ones that we have made. But if you want to have even nicer ones, you have to log in first, because then you can see Greg's files, because that's only available if you're logged in.
Yeah. I tell you, I did add some, but the ones that were already provided by him were much better, so I used his mostly, but they're just some more options.
Oh, you're fine, Greg. Yeah.
Another question about so how do you undo like a mass update operation that you made by mistake? The easiest way I can think of would maybe to reload the database from a backup. So try not to do that.
It is. So one thing I would like to suggest, if you by mistake update a large group of plants, the first thing is, so if you backup is, you're absolutely correct actually. So, but if you have the cloud database service, we can actually restore the database on on a given minute. So you might be able to, we might be able to just take you just before you did that button. But the longer you wait, the more problematic it becomes, because then other people make changes after that again. So first thing you should do, if you sort of is to try to at least make a task of all the plants that were affected, so you can follow that up. So I can show you how you can do that. Maybe I should do that so that people. So let's say I'm going into item management now, and then let's see if I can. How can I find a lot of them? So hold on, clear. I think there's a rock garden 9 or something. There's quite a few. List. Let's see. Well, that's not really impressive, isn't it? 9. I'll give this one go. I mean, I'm not going to seem to remember. Yeah. So, okay, that's not but the example, so I'm just saying, okay, they're all something. They're all dead or something. Then I do update. I need to do a date. So that was, I'm going to say it's May. And person is administrator. Or no, I'm just going to, administrator. Okay. So, and then this is where you then would be nice if I actually said how many will be updated. But anyway, so if I now click OK, and I didn't mean it, I have problems. So, okay, and then I think, oh no, it wasn't those. I made a mistake. So obviously make a note of the time, but the first thing you should do then is go to task and then say here updated by mistake or something, and then a list of items, and then I go in here and then I do advanced search, and I'm just going to add all the ones that were modified today. So that I get all the items that I've changed today as a user. I'm logged in as admin here. So I should get those 28 that was involved in this huge mistake. Yeah. So then I can later look into and try to see if I can revert it, or whether you could do a restore or whatever, but then you have a bit more control over what's happened. Yeah. So how about reviewing how admin can limit work done by particular staff? Oh yeah, that whole thing about permissions, I think we might sort of keep that for next webinar. There is, I mean, it's all, I could quickly say, when you grant access, I could spend 2 minutes on it, and then maybe we keep that for next one. When you grant people access, you give the user if you have multiple sites, most people don't, but then you give a person a role, and then dates from when that role. You can actually give a person several roles, but that might complicate things in terms of how you understand things. But so that's how you give the person access, and then here you tell what that role can do. So this is where you can then start saying that the person can do very little or a lot, and etc. for the different screens, and that's sort of starting from nothing to only look at things or only make changes, meaning adding and insert and making changes to existing records, or delete, which is then you can remove stuff, and then admin means that you also sometimes there are some other extra features in that screen, which means there are some screens where you could do special things. So that's when you need admin access. Okay. There is one thing to note, which that is there are two screens where you can give more granular access, and that is in the accession screen and the taxon screen, where you can grant access to the tab pages. There is an explanation on how to do that in one of our blog articles, I think. So I'm going to see if I can find that while we wait for Greg to say something resourceful.
No, but just, for example, like say you had a staff member that was only interested in a photo, or say was a volunteer that was only interested in photography and wanted to take photos of plants. You could just grant them access to the images tab in accessions where they could add photos to the plants, but they couldn't update the status or say it was dead or anything else. So it would sort of lock out other options.
Yeah, exactly. I think maybe I have do I have that example in here in the role types? Did I have photographer? Yeah, I do. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's good. So this photographer can look at the taxonomy, or you can make changes, which is quite generous. I think we'll change that. We don't want that. We see the taxonomy.
Right.
And what happened? And then so this is what is a bit confusing or requires a bit more explanation. When you want to grant access to the accession screen, you have to give him full access to the accession and then take away the access on the tabs. So that is one thing that might not be self-explanatory, but that's the way it is. So you see here, the person has allowed to make changes in accession, but not allowed to make changes to the details, to the items, to the parentage, and the references. So meaning he can make updates to the photos or images. Yeah. Now,
correct me if I'm wrong, but in this example, he would only be able to add images because it's update. He wouldn't be able to take images off.
He won't be able to.
He would delete images.
Yeah. So we could change that.
But if you wanted him to delete images, you could set it to that, and then he could then delete images, but then still only view the rest of the tabs.
Yeah. Correct. Right. And you may want to say that he should be able to do the same at the taxa screen. So I can say, okay, I'm just completing that, because that's where you can see all the images, together for each taxa. So we want to encourage him to do some nice work for us. So just adding all the other tabs here, taxa parentage and taxa. I'm getting sort of carried away a bit now, because that was not my intention. But it's the view.
Well, to answer this last question, the delete is a step up from update. If you can delete, that means you can update as well.
Yeah.
The power to delete is just one more superpower added to your repertoire.
You were another way. Superpower, yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Are you wearing a sort of special record-keeping dress at office, Greg?
Oh,
sort of.
I have this leotard with a big R on the front for records. Yes.
Yeah. Maybe next time you can send us a photo. That would be really nice.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll just let you. I will just let you imagine it. How's that?
Yeah. Well. Yeah. We'll see if I can get it out of my head again. But, yeah. Okay. So great. So that was the final. We're now out of time, I think. Unless other questions. Yeah. Yeah, I think there were some questions about label production with Elaine and stuff. I think that I think we'll keep that for.
I think we've covered some of the label stuff before. So if you watch some of the old webinars, and also I've uploaded to the forum like a template that I use for accession tags.
Yep.
And I've talked about how I can just run a report, a label report from Iris, and it actually outputs the accession tags into Word and puts it into a label-sized table, or each page is one tag size, and then I can just print directly from Word right to my my label printer, and it's supposed to take text files too, but as long as the margins and everything are set up properly, it actually takes Word files just fine.
Yeah. Okay. There's somebody typing, so I thought I will close off, but maybe we'll wait for that. If there's a question coming in, or maybe not. We have a few more minutes, I suppose.
Looks like Peggy says that she has a seminar at the same time, so she won't be able to make it with us, but just hook up with us later, Peggy, and if you have any questions, we can sit and have a drink and talk up, and just speak one-on-one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll round off, and then our next webinar will actually collide with our conference in. Will it, or maybe not? Let's have a look. Just having a quick look.
Haven't looked that far ahead myself. Let's see, June.
Yeah, it will. It will be. Yeah. That's during the conference, so I think we just have to say it might be difficult to keep. Well, it's early in the morning. We'll keep it. We might be able to do it from there, for sure.
From California.
Yeah, I'll have a look, and if not, we'll try to notify people that it wouldn't be. We put it on the webinar page that it will be cancelled. Anyway, we'll do our best.
If you want to attend, just fly to California, and you can do it face to face.
Yeah. Then it's not a webinar, but that's okay.
Yeah. Say a face-inar.
Yeah, it's a face-inar at the nearest Starbucks. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for joining us, and see you hopefully next month or at some of the events. And thank you very much.